Every NFL organization dreams of finding a franchise quarterback, because when they do, it changes everything. But sometimes the opposite happens. A team puts their faith in the wrong guy, and dreams quickly turn to nightmares. So let's look back at those nightmares and check out every NFL team's worst quarterback ever. And we start in Arizona, where they wasted a first-round pick on one of the biggest busts ever. The Cardinals drafted Matt Leinart in 2006 with the 10th overall pick.
The Arizona Cardinals select Matt Leinart, quarterback, USC.
And they were sure he was the future of their franchise. But boy, were they wrong. During his first 4 seasons with Arizona, Leinart won only 8 of 18 games he started and threw 20 interceptions to just 14 touchdowns. But we can't talk about bad QB play in the desert without mentioning Ryan Lindley. In his 6 games as the Cards' starting QB, he won just 1 and threw 2 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. However, over in Atlanta, they had a QB so bad, he made Leinart and Lindley look like franchise players. Kim McQuilkin's time with the Falcons was disgraceful. He legitimately put up some of the worst stats in NFL history. He finished his career with a passer rating of just 17.9, and in his 7 games as a starter, he managed to throw 28 picks. But McQuilkin wasn't a high draft pick, so the expectations for him were never too high. In Baltimore, they drafted a quarterback they thought could carry them to a Lombardi trophy. When the Ravens took Kyle Boller with the 19th pick in the 2003 draft, they were sure he was the future, but what they got was a quarterback who wasted their elite defense for years.
Boller under pressure and down he goes.
Despite having a top 6 defense every season he was there, Boller won just 20 games and lost 22. Not to mention throwing over an interception a game with 44 picks and an abysmal completion percentage of 56.9. And the Ravens let Boller play for a while before determining he wasn't the guy. But in Buffalo, Nathan Peterman wasted no time in showing the world what kind of quarterback he was.
I love this game. I put everything I have into this game and prepare as hard as I can every week.
In Peterman's debut, he threw 5 picks in the first half, breaking the NFL record for the most interceptions in a player's first career start. But somehow, that wasn't the end for Peterman.
And just trying to get better every day.
Because he was named the starter for the 2018 season opener, and during that game, he completed 5 of 18 passes with 2 interceptions, and didn't get a first down until the 3rd quarter. He was subsequently benched for Josh Allen. Over his time in Buffalo, he threw 3 touchdowns to 12 interceptions with just a 52.3 completion percentage. But at least the Bills are now thriving with Josh Allen at the helm. The same can't be said about the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers were terrible in 2023 with a 2-15 record, but somehow they were even worse in 2001 when they went 1-15 with Chris Weinke as their starter. The former Heisman-winning quarterback threw 19 interceptions and had a 54.3 completion percentage in his lone season as a starter. But Weinke is far from the only good college QB to struggle in the pros. And the Bears have ruined quite a few highly touted college prospects. But nobody can top Cade McNown. McNown was drafted 12th overall.
Chicago Bears select Cade McNown.
And after just 2 seasons, he was out of the league. He started 15 games for the Bears and had a 3-12 record. He paired awful decision-making and accuracy issues on the field with an unbearable ego off it, creating a perfect formula for one of the biggest draft busts ever. Just like Akili Smith over at the Bengals. Akili Smith could be the sole reason NFL teams test quarterback prospects so hard nowadays. Because after being drafted 3rd overall, he arrived in Cincy and couldn't understand the playbook. So his career went about as you'd expect for a quarterback who doesn't know the plays. He threw only 4 touchdowns and 13 interceptions, and had an atrocious completion percentage of 46.6. But if there's one team that knows a thing or two about bad quarterbacks, it's the Cleveland Browns. I mean, just look at this guy's jersey. And of all the names on that guy's back, it's DeShone Kizer in 2017 who put the Browns in the history books for all the wrong reasons. They became one of only 2 teams to ever go winless in a 16-game season. Kizer had one of the worst rookie seasons ever, with only 11 touchdowns and 22 interceptions, along with a 60.5 passer rating. The Browns managed to ruin his career in record time.
People's opinions of me are their opinions. I just try to go out and portray myself as a guy I know I am.
Now, the Cowboys, on the other hand, they've had some of the game's all-time great signal callers. But somewhere in between Troy Aikman and Tony Romo, there was Chad Hutchinson. Chad first played in the MLB as a pitcher, where he was bad, before deciding to try his luck in the NFL, where he was even worse. He started 9 games for the Cowboys, ending with a 2-7 record. Hutchinson also threw nearly an interception a game, with 8, and only completed 50.8% of his passes. But at least Dallas didn't waste any high draft picks on Hutchinson, like the Broncos did with Paxton Lynch. Lynch joins the large group of first-round disappointments that we've already talked about in this video, as the Broncos took him with their 26th overall pick in the 2016 draft.
The Denver Broncos select Paxton Lynch, quarterback, Memphis.
Paxton never really gave Broncos country any signs of hope. He started just 4 games in Denver and was pretty terrible, earning a 1-3 record. And well, that was all the coaches needed to see to never play him again. But at least he didn't run out of the end zone. Yeah, you know what that means. We've arrived at the Detroit Lions. But before we get to Dan Orlovsky, let's talk about their actual worst quarterback ever.
Here is Joey
Harrington. Harrington was the 3rd overall pick in the 2002 draft.
Joey Harrington, quarterback from Oregon.
And despite the many chances the Lions gave him, he failed to ever be successful.
Harrington trying to bring him to the league.
He went 18-37 in his 4 years in the Motor City and was a turnover machine with 62 interceptions and 21 fumbles. But none of Harrington's turnovers matched that of Dan Orlovsky, who did this.
Here comes Jared Allen, and he's out of bounds.
Oh, and he helped the Lions go 0-16 in 2008. Now, to Green Bay, where they are known for their amazing quarterback play. But before the Packers went from Favre to Rodgers and now to Jordan Love, yeah, screw the Packers. Let's remember a time when they had one of the worst QBs of the 80s. And his name was Randy Wright.
I consider myself very privileged to be a Green Bay Packer. Being a professional athlete carries a lot of responsibility to myself and to my teammates.
As a starter, Wright compiled a 7-25 record. But even more impressive than his record was his touchdown-to-interception ratio. He threw 31 touchdowns to 57 interceptions. He was also sacked 85 times in his 32 starts, which can't be good. But over in Houston, David Carr made those sack numbers look like child's play. Now, it's a bit unfair to have Carr on this list because of what he was working with in Houston, but let's face it, he was really bad. He was sacked an NFL record 76 times in his first season, leading to 21 fumbles and 15 interceptions. But the real problem was, it just never got better. He spent 5 years with the Texans, ending with a 22-53 record, and was sacked an insane 249 times. And while Carr became synonymous with getting sacked, Jack Trudeau of the Indianapolis Colts made his name being a really good passer to the other team. Trudeau threw 62 interceptions in his 47 starts for the Colts and completed just 52.9% of his passes.
Trudeau. Oh, clearance for Dan, just couldn't quite get high enough.
Man, the 80s were a rough time for the Colts. And so was the start of the 2010s for the Jaguars, because they had Blaine Gabbert under center.
11 men, 1 mission, win. I'm Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Blaine Gabbert, and I'm all in.
Gabbert went 5-22 as a starter in Jacksonville, which was probably due to his terrible 53.3 completion percentage. Luckily for Jags fans, injuries kept Gabbert off the field for a lot of his time there, but he gave them something to hold on to in his final season. In his last 3 starts, he managed 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions. Funnily enough, Gabbert went on to win 2 Super Bowls, one as a backup for Tom Brady in Tampa Bay and one as a backup for Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. But not so many years before the Mahomes era, the Chiefs employed some of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Like in 2011, when guys like Tyler Palko were starting games for them. Palko started just 4 games for the Chiefs before they had had enough. I guess his 2 touchdowns and 7 interceptions weren't cutting it. Or maybe it was his 59.8 QB rating. Either way, it was rough. But it's always even more rough when you use a high pick on the quarterback. So, shout out to Todd Blackledge. Sure, he was a little bit better than Palko, but when you take into account he was selected 7th overall over guys like Dan Marino and Jim Kelly, yeah, that may be worse. But it's hard to feel bad for the Chiefs, though. They've got Patrick Mahomes to dry their tears. The Raiders, however, still haven't fully recovered from drafting arguably the biggest draft bust in NFL history.
The Oakland Raiders select quarterback Jamarcus Russell.
The Jamarcus Russell saga was a dark time for the Raiders. After they selected him first overall in the 2007 draft, they also paid him a 6-year, $68 million contract. Yeah, Russell was a major reason the NFL developed a rookie wage scale in 2011, because he repaid the Raiders by coming into seasons overweight, refusing to watch film, and all-around bad quarterback play. Russell started 25 games in Oakland and threw 23 interceptions. And as you'd expect for a guy who doesn't watch film, he completed just 52.1% of his passes. The Raiders were so mad about Russell's play that they actually ended up suing him to try and get some of their money back.
With the Marcus Russell contract is they want all the money as an option bonus, and I will not do that.
And to make matters worse, the other quarterback on the Raiders roster was Andrew Walter, who was just as bad. He started 9 games for Oakland and threw just 3 touchdowns to 16 interceptions. Yikes! But there's only one quarterback who gives Jamarcus Russell a run for his money for the biggest bust ever, and that's Ryan Leaf. The Chargers selected Leaf second overall.
The San Diego Chargers select quarterback, Washington State University, Ryan Leaf.
1 pick behind Peyton Manning in the '98 draft, and the 2 prospects were viewed as 1A, 1B. But as we all know now, their careers went very differently. Manning is an all-time great, while Leaf lasted just 2 years in San Diego, throwing 33 interceptions to just 13 touchdowns and completing only 48% of his passes. And even though other teams probably loved Leaf because he loved throwing them the ball, his own teammates despised him because he was a jerk to everyone in the locker room.
Don't talk to me, all right?
But let's get to the other team that relocated to LA. Because back in St. Louis, the Rams had their own disaster of a quarterback with Keith Null. Null only lasted a year with the Rams before they waived him. Because after getting his chance to start when QB Mark Bulger was injured, he did terribly. The Rams lost all 4 games Null started, and he threw 9 picks in that span. And we can't move past the Rams just yet without talking about the disaster that was Nick Foles' lone season in St. Louis. The Rams brought in Foles after he had a couple of good years with the Eagles, hoping he'd be the answer at QB. But he was just another problem. In his 11 starts, Foles threw 10 interceptions and finished with a 4-7 record. But at least Foles saved his career by winning the Eagles a Super Bowl. The same can't be said for Cleo Lemon, whose name still makes Dolphins fans cringe to this day. After Dan Marino, the Dolphins struggled at quarterback for a long time, and Cleo Lemon was their all-time low point at the position. He won just 1 of his 8 starts for Miami and threw 7 interceptions to go along with 7 fumbles. But Lemon entered the league as an undrafted free agent, so the fact that he was even getting starts is an accomplishment. The Vikings, however, used the 12th overall pick to take an all-time bust.
The Minnesota Vikings select Christian Ponder, quarterback, Florida State.
Christian Ponder was the definition of inconsistency in Minnesota. His rookie season was terrible, but in year 2 he reeled Viking fans back in by leading them to the playoffs. Then, year 3 happened. Ponder started 9 games and went 2-6-1. He was benched multiple times throughout the season for his poor performances and never won the starting job back after that. But a quarterback who did get a second chance was Jim Plunkett. And it's a good thing he did, because during his time in New England, he looked like one of the worst QBs ever. Plunkett was the 1st overall pick in 1971, and to say he never lived up to that draft selection would be an understatement. He started 61 games in New England and threw 87 interceptions. That includes his second season with the Pats, when he threw 8 touchdowns to 25 interceptions. He finished his time in New England with an unheard of 48.5 completion percentage. And to make matters worse, Plunkett would finally live up to his 1st overall pick status, but not until he was in his 30s and playing for the Raiders, where he won 2 Super Bowls. Now, let's go from Plunkett, who played until he was nearly 40, to Heath Shuler, who was lucky to make it 4 years in the NFL. And his last year in the league with the New Orleans Saints was easily his worst. Shuler somehow won 4 of his 9 starts with the Saints, which really doesn't seem possible because he only threw 2 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. His time in the NFL was so brief, he actually completely changed careers and became a politician. And while the New York Giants' former quarterback Joe Pisarcik never got into politics, he did challenge Shuler's touchdown-to-interception ratio. There's no sugarcoating it. Pisarcik was terrible in New York. His completion percentage was 44.5. How is that even possible? He threw 18 touchdowns to 43 interceptions, and his career is largely remembered for one moment: a fumble. The Giants were attempting to run out the clock and win a game when Pisarcik fumbled a handoff, leading to what would be known as the miracle at the Meadowlands.
Wait a minute. Here's a free foot. I don't believe it. The Eagles pick it up, and Herman Edwards runs it in for a touchdown. An incredible development. Just like the opening game of the season.
The guy just couldn't catch a break, and neither could Zach Wilson during his time with the Jets.
You know, I worked as hard as I could for this moment, and there's not another team I'd want to play for besides the Jets. So I'm going to give it everything I have, and we're going to be a special team, baby. We're going for the Super Bowl.
Now, this could be a bit of recency bias because the Jets have had a lot of bad QBs over the years, but after selecting Wilson second overall, I don't know if any player has hurt Jets fans more.
As an offense, though, I mean, when you guys are only able to score 3 points, the defense only lets up 3 points. I mean, do you feel like you let the defense down at all?
No. So it was quickly obvious that Wilson was overdrafted and wasn't ready for the NFL game. He went 3-10 as a starter his rookie season, and despite being benched and thrown back in as starter multiple times over the past few years,
Wilson has time. And he's intercepted.
He just never really got better. So the Jets cut their losses and traded him to Denver after just 3 seasons.
We've got breaking news from the NFL where Zach Wilson has been traded to the Denver Broncos.
But hey, maybe Zach just needs a fresh start. At least he hasn't set a record for being bad, like former Eagles quarterback Bobby Hoying. Back in 1996, the Eagles took Hoying in the 3rd round. Then, in his 2nd season in Philly, he got his chance to start, and it seemed like the Eagles may have struck gold. Until a year later, when Hoying showed his true colors. Along with going 1-6 to start the 98 season, Hoying broke the NFL record for completions without a touchdown, and threw 9 interceptions for good measure. After that, he was benched and never started a game again. But at least Hoying didn't have to follow a legend like Steelers quarterback Mark Malone did, because after Terry Bradshaw retired in 1983, it was Malone's turn to run the offense in the Steel City. He spent 4 seasons as the Steelers starter, and that run was plagued with injuries and inconsistent play. Malone started 48 games and threw 68 interceptions in Pittsburgh, not to mention a terrible 50.2 completion percentage. In fact, the best play of his career came at a completely different position, when he caught a 90-yard touchdown. Now, Ken Dorsey never caught any touchdowns for the 49ers, but he did put together some terrible games at QB. As a 7th-round pick, Dorsey was never expected to play much in San Fran. But in his rookie year, he ended up starting 7 games. Unfortunately, he only won 1 of those starts and threw 9 picks. Dorsey only lasted 2 years in the Bay and finished with a 2-8 record as a starter. But no fan expects much from a 7th-round pick. Rick Mirer, however, was hyped as the next Joe Montana coming out of Notre Dame, and the Seahawks bought into the hype, selecting him 2nd overall in the 93 draft.
With the 2nd choice in the draft, the Seattle Seahawks select Rick Mirer, quarterback, Notre Dame.
Rick never played up to that potential. He had a decent rookie season, breaking the record for rookie passing yards and completions. But he also threw 17 interceptions to just 12 touchdowns that year. And then his career only declined from that point. He spent 4 years in Seattle, starting 51 games and throwing 56 interceptions. Mirer would like to be remembered for his college football career, not so much his professional one. And the same can be said for Steve Spurrier. Spurrier is a football legend in the state of Florida for what he did as a coach and player with the Gators, but many forget his lone season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. See, Spurrier was the Bucs' first ever quarterback when the expansion team joined the NFL in 1976. And that team did make history, but it was because they went 0-14. The Bucs had a lot of issues that season, but Spurrier was terrible too. He completed just 50.2% of his passes and threw 7 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. Another shout-out goes to Steve Young's Bucs career. That's right, before he was an MVP and Super Bowl champion, he spent 2 years in Tampa, stinking it up. He had a 3-16 record as a starter, in addition to an 11-21 touchdown-to-interception ratio. But as we know, Young turned his career around and became one of the greatest winners we've ever seen. Unfortunately for Zach Mettenberger, he never got to experience a single win in the NFL. Mettenberger spent 2 seasons with the Tennessee Titans, starting 10 games and winning a grand total of 0. The 2 seasons Mettenberger started were the Titans' worst years since moving to Tennessee, and a period Titans fans would like to forget. But one quarterback we won't let you forget is Heath Shuler, who makes his 2nd appearance in the video. Yeah, Shuler was so bad, he's 2 teams' worst quarterback ever. And before his atrocious season in New Orleans, Washington selected him 3rd overall in 1994.
The Washington Redskins select Heath Schuler, quarterback, Tennessee.
Schuler spent 3 years in the nation's capital, that is, before he became a politician, and he wasn't earning any votes amongst Redskins fans. Schuler had an awful completion percentage of 47.7 and threw 33 interceptions with only 15 touchdowns. He started just 13 games before being permanently moved to the bench, and then traded away for a 5th-round pick. Thanks for watching. For more of the best NFL content on YouTube, stick with BLITZ. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos.